My husband's ex sent him a happy anniversary text and he said it was no big deal. When I messaged her to stop, she said I was insecure and he agreed with her. I never thought I'd be the kind of wife who checks her husband's phone. I used to roll my eyes at those stories. The suspicious wife, the midnight phone snooping, the inevitable discovery. But life has a cruel way of turning you into the very person you swore you'd never become. It started with a notification. One simple text that flashed across my husband Mark's phone during dinner. Happy anniversary to us. 7 years since our first date. The sender? His ex-girlfriend, Vanessa. Mark and I have been married for 3 years, together for 5. He dated Vanessa for almost 4 years before me, and their breakup was, according to him, amicable and mutual. They'd stayed friendly, which I'd always been fine with. I'm not the jealous type. At least I never thought I was. When I saw the message, I froze mid-bite. Mark just glanced at his phone, chuckled, and continued eating his pasta as if nothing happened. Are you going to respond to that? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. He looked genuinely confused. To what? Vanessa's anniversary text. Oh, he shrugged. Probably not. It's no big deal. No big deal. His ex-girlfriend was celebrating their dating anniversary, and it was no big deal. I tried to swallow the lump forming in my throat along with my dinner. Does she text you every year on this date? I asked. I guess so. I don't really keep track. He twirled more pasta onto his fork. She's just being friendly, Sarah. It doesn't mean anything. I nodded and forced a smile. But something felt off. Why would an ex-girlfriend commemorate the anniversary of their first date when both of them had moved on? Mark was married now. To me. And yet, there was Vanessa, refusing to acknowledge that their relationship was firmly in the past. Over the next few days, the text message gnawed at me. Mark seemed to have forgotten about it entirely, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was somehow inappropriate. They'd broken up 5 years ago. Why was she still marking their milestones? I tried to talk to Mark about it again a week later. I just think it's a little weird that she remembers the exact date of your first date and feels the need to text you about it, I said as we got ready for bed. Mark sighed. Sarah, Vanessa, and I are friends. Friends remember things about each other. It doesn't mean anything. Would you be okay if one of my exes texted me on the anniversary of our first date? Sure, he said without hesitation. If you're still friends with them, why would I care? His nonchalance only made me feel more irrational. Was I overreacting? Maybe I was. Maybe this was totally normal behavior for exes who remained friends, and I was the one with the problem. But then, 2 weeks later, I caught a glimpse of his phone when a text came in as we were watching a movie. Vanessa again, this time asking if he wanted to grab coffee to catch up. Do you hang out with her often? I asked, trying to sound casual. Mark looked slightly uncomfortable for the first time. Not often, maybe once every couple of months. You've never mentioned these coffee dates before. Because they're not dates, he said, his tone slightly defensive. They're just coffee between old friends. I didn't think I needed to report every interaction I have with friends to you. You don't, I said quickly. I just didn't realize you two saw each other regularly. We don't see each other regularly, he insisted. It's just occasional coffee. You hang out with your friends all the time. My friends aren't my exes who text me romantic anniversaries, I pointed out. Mark rolled his eyes. It wasn't romantic. She was just acknowledging a date. You're making this into something it's not. I felt like I was going crazy. Was I really that insecure? Or was there something genuinely inappropriate about this friendship that Mark refused to acknowledge? I decided to take matters into my own hands. I've never been the confrontational type, but something about this situation pushed me beyond my comfort zone. I found Vanessa on Instagram and sent her a direct message. Hi, Vanessa, I wrote. This is Sarah, Mark's wife. I hope you're doing well. I wanted to reach out because I noticed you texted Mark about your dating anniversary, and I just wanted to let you know that it made me a bit uncomfortable. I respect that you and Mark are still friends, but I'd appreciate it if you could be mindful of boundaries, especially when it comes to commemorating your past relationship. Thanks for understanding. I read the message 10 times before sending it, making sure it struck the right tone, firm but friendly, reasonable but clear. I wasn't asking her to stop being friends with Mark. I was just asking for appropriate boundaries. Her response came almost immediately. Wow, Mark and I have been friends for years. The anniversary text was just a joke between friends. If you're this insecure about your marriage, you should probably talk to Mark instead of messaging his friends. This is honestly sad. My cheeks burned with humiliation as I read her words. Insecure? Sad? I wasn't being either of those things. I was just asking for basic respect as Mark's wife. I showed Mark her response, expecting him to be on my side, to see how dismissive and disrespectful she was being. Instead, he looked annoyed, at me. Why would you message her? He asked incredulously. That was completely unnecessary. I just wanted to set some boundaries, I explained, feeling my throat tighten. The anniversary text made me uncomfortable, and since you didn't seem to think it was a problem— Because it isn't a problem, he interrupted. You're making a huge deal out of nothing, and now you've made things weird between me and Vanessa for no reason. No reason? I repeated, unable to believe what I was hearing. Mark, she texted you to celebrate the anniversary of your first date. You don't think that crosses a line? No, I don't, he said firmly. And honestly, Sarah, Vanessa's right. If you're this insecure about our marriage, that's something you need to work on, not something she needs to fix. I felt like I'd been slapped. My own husband was taking his ex-girlfriend's side over mine. He thought I was being insecure and irrational. Maybe I was. But the more I thought about it, the more certain I became that I wasn't wrong to feel uncomfortable. This wasn't about insecurity. This was about respect for our marriage, for the relationship we'd built together. When I tried to explain this to Mark, he just shook his head. You're making mountains out of molehills, he said. Vanessa is my friend. She's going to stay my friend. And I need you to accept that without trying to control who I talk to or what we talk about. I'm not trying to control you, I protested. I'm just asking for reasonable boundaries. No, you're asking me to end a friendship because you're jealous, he shot back. And I'm not going to do that. The conversation ended there, with neither of us willing to back down. I went to bed feeling like a villain in my own marriage, the controlling, insecure wife who couldn't handle her husband's female friends. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Vanessa. She'd sent me a screenshot of my message to her, which she'd posted on her social media with the caption, "When your ex's new wife is so insecure she tries to ban you from texting him Jack's crazy wife club." My stomach dropped. She'd publicized our private conversation, painting me as some kind of jealous, controlling harpy. And based on the comments, her followers were eating it up. "Run, Mark, run," one commenter wrote. "Red flag city," said another. "Some women just can't handle their men having female friends," chimed in a third. I showed Mark the post, certain that now he would see how inappropriate Vanessa's behavior was. Instead, he just sighed. "What did you expect? You sent her a confrontational message out of nowhere. Of course she's going to be defensive." "Confrontational?" I repeated, dumbfounded. "Mark, I was polite, I was reasonable, and in response she publicly humiliated me." "She didn't use your name," he pointed out. "No one knows it's you except us." "That's not the point." I was almost shouting now. "The point is that she has no respect for me or our marriage, and neither do you, apparently." That was a low blow, and I regretted it as soon as the words left my mouth. Mark's face hardened. "I think you need to figure out what's really bothering you, Sarah. Because this level of jealousy over a harmless friendship isn't normal." He walked out of the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts. Was I being unreasonable? Was this really just an innocent friendship that I was misinterpreting due to my own insecurities? I decided to talk to my best friend Lisa to get an outside perspective. Lisa has known me for over a decade and would tell me straight if I was being ridiculous. "Let me get this straight," Lisa said after I explained the situation. "His ex-girlfriend texts him on their dating anniversary, meets him for regular coffee dates that he never mentioned to you, and when you politely asked her to respect some boundaries, she publicly mocked you, and Mark is defending her?" Put like that, it did sound pretty bad. "Yes," I confirmed. "And you're wondering if you're being unreasonable?" I nodded. Lisa reached over and squeezed my hand. "Sarah, you're not being unreasonable. This isn't about you being insecure. It's about both Mark and Vanessa disrespecting your marriage." Relief washed over me. Finally, someone understood. "What should I do?" I asked. "Mark thinks I'm trying to control him. He won't even consider setting any boundaries with her." "You need to have a real conversation with him," Lisa advised. "Not about Vanessa specifically, but about respect in your marriage. How would he feel if the situation were reversed? If one of your exes was constantly in your life, commemorating your romantic milestones, and you defended him to Mark?" It was a good point, and one I had tried to make before, but maybe I hadn't been clear enough. When I got home, I decided to try again with Mark. I found him in his home office working on his laptop. "Can we talk?" I asked from the doorway. He looked up, his expression guarded. "About what?" "About us, about respect in our marriage." He sighed but closed his laptop. "Go ahead." I sat down across from him. "Mark, I've been thinking a lot about why the situation with Vanessa bothers me so much, and it's not because I'm insecure or jealous. It's because I feel like neither of you are respecting our marriage." "How am I not respecting our marriage?" he asked, sounding genuinely confused. "By defending behavior that undermines it," I explained. "When Vanessa texts you to celebrate the anniversary of your first date, she's commemorating your romantic history together. That's not something friends typically do. It's something that people who are still emotionally invested in each other do." Mark started to interrupt, but I held up a hand. "Let me finish, please. I'm not saying you can't be friends with her. I'm saying that there need to be boundaries in that friendship that respect the fact that you're married now. And when I tried to establish those boundaries in what I thought was a reasonable way, both of you dismissed my feelings and made me out to be some kind of crazy, controlling wife." "That's not what it is," I insisted. "Vanessa literally posted our private conversation on social media to mock me, and instead of defending me, your wife, you defended her." Mark was quiet for a moment. "I didn't think of it that way." "Well, maybe you should have," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "How would you feel if one of my exes was texting me about our romantic milestones and I was meeting him for coffee behind your back?" "I wasn't meeting her behind your back," Mark protested. "I just didn't think it was important enough to mention." "But it was important enough for you to hide it," I pointed out. "Because on some level you knew I wouldn't be comfortable with it." Mark looked away, and I could tell my words were finally sinking in. "I love you, Mark," I continued. "And I trust you. I'm not asking you to end your friendship with Vanessa. I'm asking you to set appropriate boundaries with her that respect our marriage. And I'm asking you to have my back when I try to set those boundaries myself." There was a long silence. Finally, Mark nodded. "You're right," he admitted. "I should have had your back, and I should have seen why the anniversary text was inappropriate." Relief washed over me. "Thank you. I'll talk to Vanessa," he promised. "I'll make it clear that certain topics, like our dating history, are off limits now. And I'll ask her to take down that social media post." It was a start, at least. But as I left his office, I couldn't help but wonder why it had taken so much effort to get Mark to see my side. Why had his first instinct been to defend Vanessa rather than support me? Was there more to their friendship than he was admitting? I tried to push those thoughts away. Mark had agreed to set boundaries with Vanessa. That was what mattered. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and I couldn't completely shake the feeling that there was something Mark wasn't telling me. The next day, Mark showed me a text exchange with Vanessa where he had asked her to take down the social media post and to be more mindful of boundaries in their friendship. Her response was less than enthusiastic, lots of eye-rolling emojis and comments about me being territorial, but she did agree to remove the post. "See," Mark said, Problem solved. I nodded, but I couldn't help feeling that the problem wasn't really solved at all. Vanessa had agreed to Mark's requests, but her attitude made it clear that she didn't respect me or our marriage. And Mark still didn't seem to fully understand why her behavior had been inappropriate in the first place. A week later, I was using Mark's laptop to print something when a Facebook notification popped up. It was from Vanessa, commenting on a photo Mark had posted of us at a friend's wedding. "You clean up nice? Remember how you spilled red wine all over yourself at my cousin's wedding?" It was a seemingly innocent comment, but it still felt like Vanessa was trying to remind Mark of their shared history, inserting herself into our present. And when I checked her profile, I discovered that while she had indeed taken down the post mocking my message to her, she had replaced it with a vague status. Some people just can't handle their partners having opposite-sex friends. So sad in 2023, ours toxic. It was clearly about me, even if she didn't say so explicitly. And it had dozens of comments from her friends agreeing with her and asking for tea. I closed the laptop, feeling defeated. This wasn't going to stop. Vanessa was determined to maintain her inappropriate relationship with Mark, and Mark wasn't willing to set firm enough boundaries to prevent it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the little things that had been bothering me. The anniversary text, the secret coffee dates, Vanessa's dismissive attitude toward me, Mark's defensiveness. What if there was more going on than just an inappropriately close friendship? I did something I never thought I would do. While Mark was sleeping, I checked his phone. I scrolled through his text exchanges with Vanessa, looking for evidence of what? I wasn't even sure. Most of their texts were indeed innocuous. Updates about mutual friends, jokes, memes. But then I found a conversation from a few months ago where Vanessa had asked Mark if he ever wondered what would have happened if they hadn't broken up. Mark's response, "Sometimes. But that's life, right? Different choices, different outcomes." My heart sank. It wasn't exactly damning evidence of an affair, but it certainly suggested that Mark wasn't as over Vanessa as he claimed to be, and it made me question whether their friendship was really as innocent as he insisted. I put the phone back and lay awake for hours, debating what to do. Should I confront Mark about the text? That would mean admitting I'd snooped through his phone, crossing a line I'd always promised myself I wouldn't cross. But keeping quiet meant living with this new knowledge, this new doubt festering inside me. In the morning, I made my decision. I wouldn't mention the text directly, but I would insist on couples counseling. Mark and I clearly had issues with boundaries and respect that we needed professional help to address. To my surprise, Mark agreed to counseling without much resistance. "If it will help you feel more secure in our marriage, I'm willing to try it," he said. His phrasing still put the blame on me and my insecurity, but I decided not to argue the point. At least he was willing to go to counseling. Our first session was eye-opening. The counselor, Dr. Chen, listened to both of us explain the situation from our perspectives. Then she asked a question that caught both of us off guard. "Mark, if Sarah had a close male friend who was also her ex, and he texted her to commemorate their dating anniversary, would you truly be comfortable with that? Be honest." Mark hesitated. I guess I've never really thought about it that way." "Think about it now," Dr. Chen encouraged. Mark was quiet for a moment. "I suppose it would depend on the context." "The context is exactly what Sarah described," Dr. Chen said. "This ex-boyfriend texts Sarah on the anniversary of their first date. He meets her for coffee regularly. When you express discomfort, Sarah dismisses your feelings and defends her friendship with her ex. How would you feel?" Mark looked uncomfortable. "I wouldn't like it," he admitted reluctantly. "Why not?" Dr. Chen pressed. "Because," Mark struggled to articulate his thoughts. "Because it would seem like he was still hung up on her. And because some things should be just between us, as a married couple." Dr. Chen nodded. "That's exactly Sarah's point. In a marriage, certain boundaries need to be respected, not because either of you is controlling or insecure, but because those boundaries protect the specialness of your relationship." I felt a wave of vindication wash over me. Finally, someone was helping Mark see what I had been trying to explain all along. Dr. Chen continued, "Mark, has your friendship with Vanessa changed at all since you married Sarah?" Mark shrugged. "Not really. We've been friends for years, so our dynamic is pretty established." "That might be part of the problem," Dr. Chen suggested. "When you marry someone, all your relationships shift to accommodate this new primary relationship. If your friendship with Vanessa hasn't evolved to respect the boundaries of your marriage, that's something that needs to be addressed." Mark nodded slowly, seeming to absorb this perspective for the first time. After the session, Mark was quiet as we drove home. Finally, as we were about to pull into our driveway, he spoke. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he said softly. "I think I've been so focused on defending my friendship with Vanessa that I haven't been listening to your concerns or respecting your feelings." It was the most genuine apology he'd offered since this whole mess began, and I felt some of the tension in my chest ease. "I appreciate that," I said. "So what now?" "I'm going to set clearer boundaries with Vanessa," he promised. "No more texts about our past relationship. No more private coffee meetings. And if she can't respect those boundaries, then maybe we can't be friends after all." It was exactly what I needed to hear, but I couldn't help wondering, would he actually follow through? The next day, Mark showed me a text he had sent to Vanessa, explaining that their friendship needed to change out of respect for his marriage. He was direct and firm, leaving no room for her to dismiss his concerns as he had dismissed mine. Vanessa's response was predictable. "Wow, so Sarah has you completely whipped now? I thought you were stronger than that, Mark." Guess I was wrong. Mark didn't respond to her manipulative message, which I took as a good sign. But the real test came a month later, on another anniversary, the day Mark and Vanessa had first met. No text came from Vanessa. No social media comments. No attempts to reminisce about their shared past. "Did you block her?" I asked Mark, surprised by the silence. He shook his head. "No, I think she finally got the message. Or maybe she just moved on. I nodded, hoping he was right. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Vanessa wasn't done yet. She had been too persistent, too determined to maintain her inappropriate connection with Mark. Would she really give up that easily? My suspicions were confirmed a week later when Lisa called me. "Sarah, I don't want to start trouble, but I thought you should know," she began, her voice hesitant. "I just saw Vanessa and Mark together at Riverstone Cafe." My heart dropped. "What?" "They were sitting in a corner booth talking pretty intensely," Lisa continued. "I didn't approach them, but I snapped a quick photo if you want to see it." I did want to see it, even though I knew it would hurt. Lisa sent the photo. Mark and Vanessa, heads close together, his hand reaching across the table to touch hers. It wasn't necessarily incriminating. They could have been discussing anything. But combined with Mark's promise to stop meeting her privately, it felt like a betrayal. When Mark got home that evening, I showed him the photo. "Can you explain this?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady despite the storm raging inside me. Mark's face fell. "Sarah, it's not what it looks like." "Then what is it?" I demanded. "Because it looks like you're having a private coffee date with Vanessa after promising me you wouldn't. She texted me saying she needed to talk about something important," Mark explained. "I thought it would be better to meet her once, face to face, to make sure she understood that our friendship needed to change." "And did you tell me about this meeting?" "No," he admitted. "I was going to, but I didn't want you to worry. I was handling it." "Handling it by holding her hand?" I asked, pointing to the photo. Mark looked at the image more closely. "I wasn't holding her hand. I was patting it to say goodbye. This was the end of our conversation." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But after weeks of half-truths and minimizations, my trust was hanging by a thread. "Mark, I can't do this anymore," I said, my voice breaking. "I can't keep wondering if there's something you're not telling me. I can't keep feeling like the paranoid, controlling wife when all I'm asking for is basic respect." "What are you saying?" Mark asked, looking genuinely alarmed. "I'm saying I need space to think," I replied. "I'm going to stay at Lisa's for a few days." "Sarah, please," Mark pleaded. "I swear to you, there's nothing going on between me and Vanessa. The coffee meeting was closure, that's all." "Then why didn't you tell me about it?" I asked. "If it was so innocent, why hide it?" He had no good answer for that. I packed a small bag and went to Lisa's, ignoring Mark's calls and texts for the first day. I needed clarity, and I wasn't going to get it with him constantly trying to explain away his actions. On the second day, a package arrived at Lisa's apartment for me. Inside was a printout of all of Mark's text exchanges with Vanessa since our marriage began, along with a letter from Mark. "I want you to see everything," the letter read. "No more secrets, no more hiding. I've been an idiot, Sarah. I let Vanessa manipulate me into believing that you were being unreasonable when really, I was the one disrespecting our marriage. I'm sorry. I love you, and I'll do whatever it takes to rebuild your trust." I spent hours going through the texts. Most were indeed innocent, but there were moments, subtle flirtations, inside jokes, reminiscences about their past, that made me uncomfortable. Nothing explicitly crossed the line into infidelity, but the emotional intimacy was clear. The most recent texts were from after our counseling session, where Mark had indeed tried to set boundaries with Vanessa. Her responses had been manipulative, alternating between guilt-tripping him and minimizing his concerns. The coffee meeting had been her idea, a last-ditch effort to maintain her hold on him. And according to Mark's texts after the meeting, he had firmly told her that their friendship needed to change dramatically if it was going to continue at all. I wasn't sure what to think. On one hand, Mark had been honest about the content of the coffee meeting. On the other hand, he had still hidden it from me, breaking a promise in the process. I called Dr. Chen for advice. "What Mark did was wrong," she confirmed after I explained the situation. "He should have told you about the meeting with Vanessa, even if his intentions were good. But sending you all their texts shows a commitment to transparency that's encouraging. The question is, do you want to work through this, or are you ready to walk away?" It was a question I had been asking myself since I left. Did I want to rebuild our marriage, knowing that trust had been broken? Or was this the last straw? After 3 days at Lisa's, I decided to go home. Not because everything was fixed, but because I couldn't make any decisions hiding at my friend's apartment. Mark was waiting for me, looking like he hadn't slept in days. As soon as I walked in, he stood up but kept his distance, respecting the space I had asked for. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "I've been an idiot." "Yes, you have," I agreed. "But I'm ready to talk about it if you are." We spent hours that night laying everything out on the table. I told Mark exactly why Vanessa's behavior bothered me, not because I was insecure, but because she was deliberately trying to maintain an inappropriate emotional connection with him. I explained how hurt I was that he had defended her instead of me, his wife, and I made it clear that if we were going to move forward, things needed to change. Mark listened, really listened, for the first time since this whole mess began. When I was done, he shared his perspective, how he had been so afraid of being seen as controlled by his wife that he had ignored my legitimate concerns, how he had convinced himself that Vanessa's behavior was normal for friends because he didn't want to admit that she might have ulterior motives, and how, deep down, he had enjoyed the attention, even though he never intended to be unfaithful. "I blocked Vanessa's number," he told me, "and I've deleted her from all my social media. I know that won't fix everything, but it's a start." It was a start. But we both knew we had more work to do to rebuild what had been broken. We continued with counseling, both together and individually. Mark worked on understanding why he had been so resistant to setting boundaries with Vanessa, and I worked on communicating my needs more clearly before they reached a breaking point. 6 months later, we're still a work in progress. But things are better. Mark hasn't spoken to Vanessa since that final coffee meeting, and I haven't checked his phone since the night I left. We're learning to trust each other again, one day at a time. And I've learned something important about myself in the process. It's not insecure or controlling to expect your partner to respect your marriage. It's not jealous to ask for appropriate boundaries with exes. It's normal, it's healthy, and it's necessary for any relationship to thrive. I don't know what the future holds for Mark and me, but I do know that I'm no longer afraid to stand up for myself and for our marriage, and that at least is progress.